Hello again. So now we're on to the ceremony itself, and needless to say, you can't stage any photos here. Try it and you'd embarrass yourself and probably be thrown out of the church. But generally speaking, it's a quiet time. You need to be discreet. If you move around, try not to stomp around or get in people's way. Just common sense really. Some things you just can't plan for, but even during the ceremony there are small moments that you should be aware of, or opportunities that you can take advantage of. I've categorised some of them, so let's take a look. This is a pretty obvious one. It's usually, but not always, a close-up, and where either the bride or the groom is looking at their partner. The composition depends on where I would have been standing, but I quite like to frame the shot over the shoulder of the person with their back to me. I generally concentrated on the bride if possible. Let's face it, the day is really all about her, isn't it? The groom is just there to make up the numbers. I used to focus on the bride and watch out for sneaky little looks between the two of them. Sometimes slightly tearful expressions, but usually happy and kind of knowing expressions. These looks and expressions are so fleeting, I usually focused with my finger half pressed on the shutter button, just waiting for that special look. Sometimes I'd be disappointed, but usually something good happens. Again, notice my use of landscape orientation to show more of the scene and consequently more context. Portrait orientation tends to close in on the couple. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. It probably depends on the country and maybe the religion on whether or not that phrase is said, but I've heard that phrase loads of times at weddings. And when I do, I focus on the bride and groom and wait. Sometimes they'll turn around and give a kind of little knowing smile to the congregation. So I'll wait for it and then click. I've got that one little moment. But of course the minister doesn't always say it. Also, what I love is that despite the fact that the ceremony is quite a solemn occasion, or maybe even because of it, it is a celebration, and so there's usually some laughter. Well, there is in this country anyway. So it's great if you can capture some of those moments. Quite often it's as a result of someone making a mistake during the vows, or maybe getting their partner's name wrong. That's always good for a laugh. Or maybe even the minister will say something mildly amusing during a little sermon. On more than one occasion I've heard a child say something out loud that was quite funny. But whatever the reason, watch for those little moments, and a little anticipation helps here too. On one occasion, the bride dropped the ring as she was placing it on her husband's finger. You could hear the ring roll along before falling down a grating in the ground. Obviously all hell broke loose and there was much scrambling around on the floor. Here's the vicar holding up the ring, having just found it. The couple were able to laugh about it afterwards. At this wedding, during the blessing, the congregation started laughing. Not something that should normally happen at that solemn time. So there were a few confused faces all around. But here you can see why. The best man had painted some letters on the bottom of the groom's shoes. HE on one shoe and LP on the other. I don't think the bride was too amused at that one. It's generally quite easy to stand back with, say, a 70 to 200mm lens picking off photos of the bride and groom. You can get some great shots that way. But I was always aware that if I were to take too many of that type of shot, the images as a whole would lack variety. So with that in mind, I used to take some wider photos, taking in the congregation and other areas of the church. There's a variety of different ways of doing this, obviously. You can just take various shots of the congregation on their own, just by going wide, or maybe by making use of a belfry, if possible. That can provide some nice overall photos of the whole scene. Or maybe just pick out a few of the congregation or the bridesmaids. They could be singing or just holding the order of service. That type of shot can be quite nice from the side using a shallow depth of field. Also, it's quite common for one or two of the family to become a bit tearful, so if you spot anyone crying into their handkerchief, get a quick shot off. I think that's okay, after all they're tears of joy, aren't they? My own favourite type of congregation shots were those which included the bride and groom, either from the side or maybe from behind them. Obviously, that's not always possible. When including a congregation, it's always a good idea to wait for a good moment. Either some laughter or clapping or even some cheering. I split this video into two to avoid it becoming too lengthy. That's the end of part one. Part two comes up next.